3 months of trying to work with Captain Zerath, and I'd never seen her face. The Valkorian armor was impressive, adaptive, nearly impenetrable, integrated with systems that made its wearer a walking tactical weapons platform. But it also meant I'd spent 3 months talking to a helmet, receiving responses through a voice modulator that stripped away every emotional indicator I relied on to read people. Your flanking proposal has inadequate tactical merit. Zerath's modulated voice was flat, emotionless, final. I stood in the training facility, watching her run combat simulations with the kind of devastating efficiency that made human martial arts look like children playing. She moved like violence incarnate, every strike precisely calculated, every movement economical and lethal. Could you elaborate on what makes it inadequate? I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. Insufficient coverage of escape vectors, predictable pattern recognition for enemy analysis, resource allocation and efficiency. She didn't even turn to face me, continuing her forms. Next proposal. 3 months of this, 3 months of every tactical suggestion dismissed with emotionless assessment. 3 months of trying to build rapport with someone who remained perpetually encased in armor, whose reactions I couldn't read, whose face I'd never seen. The Joint Human-Valkorian Defense Initiative was supposed to foster cooperation. Instead, I felt like I was advising a sophisticated combat drone rather than working with a person. I'd tried everything. Respect met with formal acknowledgement but no warmth. Humor completely ignored. Attempting to find common ground outside of tactics, shut down with reminders that personal matters weren't relevant to military coordination. Nothing penetrated that armor, literal or metaphorical. Something in me snapped. Not rage, but calculated recklessness born from 3 months of feeling invisible to someone I was supposed to work alongside. I watched Zerath complete her simulation, then approached under pretense of discussing the exercise. Captain, about the targeting sequence in that last scenario. As she turned to face me, I struck the armor's shoulder joint, not hard enough to injure through the protective layers, but precisely targeting the structural weak point I'd studied in technical schematics when trying to understand Valkorian equipment. The section sparked, servos grinding audibly as self-repair systems struggled with unexpected internal damage. Zerath went completely still. You deliberately damaged my armor. The voice modulator made it impossible to read emotion, but the statement itself carried weight. Yes, I said, pulse hammering but voice steady. 3 months, Captain. 3 months of trying to work with someone I can't see, can't read, can't connect with. You want to remain a faceless soldier. Fine, but I needed to know if there's actually a person under there, or if you're just the armor with organic components. The silence stretched. I'd probably just destroyed my career. Deliberately damaging alien military equipment, assaulting a commanding officer, sabotage, I could think of at least 6 charges they could file. You have no comprehension of what you've done. Zerath's hand moved to her helmet release. You want to see, you demand it through sabotage, then look. The helmet released with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Zerath removed the helmet slowly, deliberately, and I found myself staring at a face I wasn't prepared for. Not because of alien features, though the elegant bone structure and luminous violet eyes were striking, but because of the extensive scarring covering the left side of her face, burns, long-healed but vivid, extending from temple to jaw. The kind of injury that spoke of catastrophic damage survived against unlikely odds. But it wasn't the scarring that stopped my breath. It was her expression, not the cold fury I expected, something more complicated. Humiliation, defiance, and underneath it all raw vulnerability of someone whose armor was more than military equipment. Satisfied? Zerath's voice without the modulator was different, still controlled, but carrying tones the helmet filtered away. You wanted to see the person. Here she is. My immediate instinct was to apologize, but the words stuck because I recognized this moment wasn't about my comfort. I'd forced this revelation. Now I had to face what it meant. The armor, I said quietly, understanding clicking into place. It's not just equipment. Perceptive, her tone was sharp. The armor is regenerative medical support. It manages pain, assists motor functions on my left side, where nerve damage limits mobility, provides environmental controls that prevent infection in compromised tissue. But more than that, she stopped, something flickering across her expression. It allows me to be seen as captain, as soldier, as Valkorian warrior, not as damaged, not as someone who survived something terrible and is still dealing with the aftermath. I finished. Zerath's eyes narrowed. You presume to understand. No, but I understand why you'd want control over who sees your vulnerability and when. I felt the weight of my actions settling fully. I sabotaged that control because I was frustrated. That was wrong. Yes, it was. Zerath set the helmet on a nearby bench, the gesture feeling significant, choosing not to immediately re-armor despite clear discomfort. You damaged my equipment to provoke reaction. You wanted to see if I was actually a person, as if personhood requires visible face and readable emotion. That's human-centric assumption. You're right, I'm sorry. Apology noted but insufficient. She turned to face me fully, and without the helmet, I could see the pain management systems built into her armor working harder, subtle indicators of discomfort she normally kept hidden. You acted from frustration that I didn't accommodate your need for familiar social cues. Perhaps you should question why you needed them. Because working with someone I can't read makes me feel isolated and ineffective, I admitted. Because I'm used to reading faces and body language, and without that I'm lost. So you forced me to be readable by your standards, rather than learning to work within mine. Yes, that's exactly what I did. The realization sat heavily. Which means I'm the one who's been refusing actual cooperation. Zerath considered this, her expression cycling through reactions I could now see clearly: surprise, skepticism, something that might be grudging respect. Most humans would continue defending their actions. You acknowledge fault. Because I was at fault, I acted like my frustration justified sabotage. It didn't. I gestured to the damaged armor section. I can help repair that, if you'll let me. You caused the damage. Why would I trust your repair? Because I understand now that it matters. That it's not just equipment but essential support. Because I owe you better than what I've given. Zerath studied me for a long moment, her violet eyes searching my face the way I was searching hers. The armor will auto-repair over the next several hours, but the gesture is noted. She paused. You wanted to work with a person rather than a helmet. Here is your opportunity. Let's see if you can actually handle what you demanded. The weeks following the incident transformed our working relationship fundamentally, though not in ways I initially expected. Zerath didn't immediately return to wearing her helmet continuously. Instead, she created new boundaries, wearing it during formal operations, but removing it during strategy sessions in private spaces. It wasn't comfort, I realized, but controlled exposure. Testing whether I could handle seeing her without armor and whether she could tolerate being seen. Your tactical proposal from yesterday, Zerath said during one such session, helmet beside her on the table. The flanking maneuver, utilizing the debris field, elaborate on the escape vectors. I walked through the strategy, but now I could see her reactions. The slight tightening around her eyes when she identified a flaw, the subtle shift in posture when intrigued by a concept, the way her fingers drummed when working through complex calculations. You're watching me, Zerath observed. Learning to read you without the armor, I admitted. Is that uncomfortable? Yes. She didn't elaborate, but continued. Your escape vector doesn't account for debris field destabilization under weapons fire. The very cover you're using would become additional hazard. Point taken, what if we worked through the modification, and I discovered that Zerath without the helmet's modulation was actually more communicative. Not effusive, but precise in a way that came from choosing words carefully rather than filtering them through technology. Why did you keep the helmet on constantly before? I asked during a break, then immediately regretted it. That's too personal, sorry. No, it's relevant context. Zerath considered. The injury that damaged my face also affected my neural pathways. I experience sensory processing differently now. Lights seem brighter, sounds more aggressive, environmental stimuli more intense. The helmet filters help manage that. Additionally, she paused, clearly debating vulnerability. When people see the scarring, they see damage, they see weakness. In Valkorian military culture, visible injury suggests inadequacy. I earned my command through performance, but appearance matters. The armor allows respect without the distraction of pity. I don't pity you, don't you? Humans have extensive literature romanticizing scars as badges of honor. but your faces when you see significant disfigurement tell different story. Discomfort, sorrow, questions about suffering rather than focusing on survival. You're not wrong about that tendency, I admitted, but what I feel looking at you isn't pity. It's respect that you survived something that should have killed you, and frustration with myself that I forced this exposure before you were ready. I wasn't going to be ready. Not with you, not with any human assigned to this platform. Zerath's voice was matter-of-fact. Your sabotage forced choice I was avoiding. That's simultaneously violation and perhaps necessary intervention. She met my eyes directly. I'm not thanking you, but I acknowledge that remaining perpetually armored was its own form of isolation. We developed new rhythms. Zerath taught me to read Valkorian body language, subtle ear positions indicating attention versus dismissal, shoulder angles communicating deference or challenge, hand gestures carrying meaning beyond human interpretation. I shared human tactical doctrine with explanations of psychological and cultural factors that informed strategies Zerath initially dismissed as inefficient. Humans account for morale and emotional factors more than Valkorians do, Zerath observed during one session. We're trained to fight regardless of emotional state. You're trained to maintain emotional state that facilitates fighting. Different approaches to the same goal, I suggested. Perhaps Valkorian approach causes damage we don't acknowledge. She touched the scarred side of her face unconsciously. I was told emotional regulation was weakness. That pain should be managed but not felt. That armor, literal and psychological, was strength. And now I wonder if there's difference between strength and suppression. Her expression was thoughtful. Removing the helmet means experiencing more sensory input, yes, but also means I can see your reactions clearly, can communicate without technological filtering, can be. She searched for the word, present, rather than performing presence through armor. That sounds exhausting. It is. Zerath didn't sugarcoat it, but perhaps less exhausting than perpetual performance was. 2 months after the incident, the station commander called our coordination unprecedented human Valkorian tactical success. Our joint strategies combined human psychological warfare with Valkorian military precision in ways that surprised everyone, including ourselves. But more significant than professional success was the foundation we were building. Your birthday is approaching, Zerath said during a strategy session. I looked up in surprise. Humans celebrate birth anniversaries with social gatherings and gifts. Is this correct? Generally, yes. How did you? Your personnel file. I've been reviewing human cultural practices to better understand contextual factors in your tactical thinking. She set down her data pad. I wish to give you something. Not for your birthday specifically, but as acknowledgement of what happened between us. She retrieved a small case from her equipment locker. Inside was a piece of Valkorian armor, not functional equipment, but decorative metalwork formed in traditional patterns. In Valkorian culture, we sometimes give armor pieces to individuals outside our family structure as recognition of trust. You've seen me without armor. This symbolizes that vulnerability shared. She paused. You don't have to wear it or display it. It's beautiful, I interrupted, genuinely moved. Thank you, Zerath. I don't know if I've earned this. You damaged my armor deliberately to provoke revelation. Then you spent months learning to work with that revelation rather than exploiting it. You acknowledged fault and changed behavior. In Valkorian culture, that's significant honor. She paused. Also, your tactical thinking has improved considerably. Probably because I can finally work with you, instead of guessing at what you're thinking. Languages, Zerath corrected, plural. Body language, cultural context, tactical philosophy, personal history. We've been learning multiple languages simultaneously, and we're still beginners in most of them. Yes, but fluency isn't required for communication, only commitment to keep learning. Her expression held something I'd rarely seen from her, contentment. I'm scheduled for medical review next month. They'll assess whether the armor modifications sufficiently support my injury management. Are you worried? Always, but less than before. Before, I feared any suggestion that armor wasn't sufficient because that would mean admitting vulnerability. Now, she looked at me directly. Now I have evidence that vulnerability doesn't equal weakness. That being seen, truly seen, can be survived. For what it's worth, I said carefully, Working with you has changed how I think about armor, literal and metaphorical, about the things we use to protect ourselves, and when protection becomes isolation. You're referring to your own armor. Maybe. I've spent my career being the adaptable one, the bridge builder. But that meant never showing when I didn't understand, never admitting when I was lost. I damaged your armor because I couldn't tolerate my own discomfort. That's its own kind of protective equipment. Zerath nodded slowly. Then perhaps we've both learned that armor has purpose and limits. That protection is necessary but not sufficient. That being seen requires risk, but isolation has its own costs. The station alarm interrupted, incoming situation requiring tactical response. Zerath reached for her helmet, and I noticed the difference in the gesture.